Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're consuming this, and welcome to the Out of Practice podcast, the show helping newly qualified ACAs navigate life and a career out of practice. I'm your host, Darren Spain, a former PwC auditor and ACA student, now founder of 17 Partners, and today I'm joined by Paul Bishop, who spent 5 years with Grant Thornton before making the move into industry, where he has worked for big names including British Airways, LabTech, and Telereal Trillium. Paul has seen it all during his career, even managing to carve out a role that was tailor-made for him during his time with British Airways, and has also made the coveted move into the commercial finance world. So I am excited to delve into how he made this transition and get his tips and advice for you guys also wanting to make a similar move. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Darren. Pleasure to be here.
No, thank you very much. To be fair, we'll address the elephant in the room. Full transparency for the listeners. This is the second time I've asked that I'm taking Paul's time because we recorded a brilliant episode 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately my footage was unusable. So here we are recording part 2. I like to say we enjoyed the conversation so much that we said, let's have it again. Isn't that right, Paul?
Absolutely. It was a great chat last time. And yeah, desperately trying to remember what we discussed 2 weeks ago. Yeah. I'll try and be consistent.
No worries. Well, look, I've hopefully got the same questions or similar questions anyway. So, and the good thing about this is really, obviously, a lot of it is your story, right? And you're the best person to tell us that. So why don't we dive straight in? Paul, keen to understand what made you join Grant Thornton and pursue the ACA to begin with?
Yeah, I guess a lack of decision making probably is the way to describe it. I studied mathematics at Edinburgh University, and a lot of my friends and people on my course were interviewing very early on in the final year with the likes of PwC, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG, and I hadn't really done a lot of thinking about kind of career at that point. More my focus was that let's just get the degree and we'll work on it from there. And obviously you go to careers advisors and you sort of say, right, I'm doing a master's degree, what's your recommendation? And a lot of them will point you in the direction of either actuarial sciences or accountancy, or financial services more broadly. And yeah, I'm not a very good creative accountant, so I just sort of went, okay, yeah, let's go and do accountancy. And actually, as a recommendation, as a decision in my life, I wouldn't have changed it because the qualifications set me in good stead. B, the people that I've met along this journey that've been fantastic. It's there's so much application all over the place in terms of like personal life, relationships, the doors that it's opened have been phenomenal.
Nice, brilliant. And so you joined Grant Thornton in 2007, right? If I'm not mistaken, you spend a lot of your time in auditing companies within the financial services space, and also in the not-for-profit space, which not-for-profit and government agencies, which are kind of described as an oxymoron, given the two complete opposite ends of kind of objectives and what they're trying to achieve, right? But as I said, joined in 2007, so very keen to understand kind of what your time was like at Grant Thornton, especially given we all know what happened in 2008 and the aftermath of that. So obviously the financial crisis, and given you were auditing financial service companies, as I say, keen to understand kind of how you found your time there and the impact that had on your experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was fast tracking the ACA qualification through Grant Thornton, so pretty much the first 3 or 4 months, September to December, were study. Turn up, straight to college. 2 weeks, half a dozen exams done already, which was a proper shock to the system, and particularly in terms of shock to the system later on when we started studying for the written papers as opposed to the computer-based papers. Going to college and then on the second or third day you'd find yourself landed with a full exam that you were doing as a mock. That a lot of people, you'd obviously have your gripes and complaints because you're like, hang on a minute, I'm not prepared for this. But obviously, it was more about just getting the technique right. I think the interesting thing is someone once said to me that you don't learn to drive when you're doing driving lessons. You learn to pass the test, and you learn to drive afterwards, because there's so much that you need to learn, so many concepts and things that don't really make any sense. And I think that was kind of very true of the accounting qualifications. There was so much that you just absorbed, and you're like, I don't really understand it, I haven't got the time to understand it, but I'm just going to go with it. Some of it is logical, some of it harks back to your qualification, and some of it you pick up on the job, and you go, oh, okay, now I'm practically applying this. That started to make a little bit of sense. But yeah, just a really intense first period of study and getting up to speed. And work-wise, most of the time you were just sat there sort of going through sets of accounts, reading about companies and learning. The job bit was actually just sort of making sure they all added up right, and there were no obvious omissions or errors. But the learning part of me was fascinated, because you'd be sitting in the hot desk area one afternoon, and someone would say, right, I've got a job for someone who's available, and you go, yep, hand up, I'm free. Here you go, here's a set of accounts, go and do your bit. And that could be anything, any kind of company, which was the fascinating bit. If you were sat there under your own steam, you wouldn't do it, but because you had to do it, you were like, what have I got today? Oh, this is a listed property company, or here's a small charity, or here's a mining company, and you'd look at their stats, and you're just trying to get a feel for how that company operates and what it does. So that period of time was really fascinating and enlightening, really. Just sort of seeing how different businesses worked and operated.
Yeah. And I guess with the financial services industries that you were, or financial service clients that you were auditing, and as I say, the crash that came, I mean, did you see that impacting a lot of the work you were doing? I imagine going concern might have been a very hot topic of conversation, which is pretty much usually just going concern, yeah, cool, ticked off, and it's all done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Previously, going concern was generally quite straightforward, I think. Or at least in my experience it was. I was a junior, so it was go and get the forecast for the next 18 months and the budget, and ask a few fairly rudimentary questions, and then the crash came in 2008, and suddenly there was this big period of uncertainty, because people were not sure what the implications of it were going to be initially, and over time there was obviously just a tightening up on procedures. So there were new procedures, there were changes to existing procedures. There's a lot more thought went into not just the going concern, but then also the focus on existing tests. I mean, at Grant Thornton, most of our testing methodology was substantive based, so we were going through and ticking and bashing as much to invoices as possible. So the on-site bit didn't change much, but the kind of the pre-audit and the post-audit work was quite different, particularly when you were doing your controls testing. There was a lot more focus around that, and making sure that we were reporting back to our audit clients as much useful and helpful observations as we could.
No, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. And I guess, so what lessons did audit teach you that are kind of stuck with you into today then?
That's a good question. I think it's the importance of building relationships, and it's also the importance of not assuming anything before you get to it. And what I mean by those two things is, working for Grant Thornton, most of my audits weren't massive. I'd roll onto an audit, I'd be on there for anywhere between sort of 3 weeks to 2 months doing the field work. And when you're on site, you have to recognise that other people are trying to do their day job as well as support you. And sometimes if you come up with a big list of questions and requests for information, you could be walking into a massive emotional trap with someone. So it was, it could be quite daunting sometimes, and the important thing was to remain professional, but at the same time to approach people in the right way. And if I always found that people didn't take the time out to get to know their clients. A lot of my experience with auditors is that they're fairly junior. They turn up, they carry their laptop in their hand, and they go, "Can I ask you some questions?" And they crack straight into it. And I always found it super valuable to go and talk to someone and just sort of have a chat with them. How is your weekend? What is the work you're doing? Genuine interest in those people, and that paid dividends in terms of being able to get buy-in into the things that I needed them to do. And I was solely dependent on these people. The information they provided, the explanations they gave, that was all coming from them. So there wasn't, all I'd be doing is taking it away, checking it, verifying it, and validating it, and then typing it into the system and going, right, I've made a record of all of those notes. Being fairly junior, you still had to do your best to sort of think outside the box, but sometimes you couldn't see the wood for the trees. You do your testing, and then you get to the end of the day, and it wouldn't be until you were kind of on the tube home that you'd be thinking about, well, what does that mean? And does any of that stuff that they told me make sense? So yeah, that I'd say that was key for me, was that relationship building.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that, because I remember laughing and joking about this with Alicia Gibson. It was my first episode, because we were talking about how, for example, me, I always did that as well. I always made sure I got to know the people I was talking to, no matter who it was and no matter what role they played within the client's organisation. But sometimes to a little bit too much, because I'd often spend, honestly, Paul, I'll be speaking to some of them for it got up to 2 hours at times, and I'll go back to the audit room and they'll be like, "Where on earth have you been?" And I'm like, "I was just talking to so and so from AP," and they're like, "Darren, you really need to just keep it okay, get to know them a bit, but come on, you're taking it a bit overboard there." But I can be a bit guilty of A, waffling, and B, just showing interest in people, right, and just getting to know them and asking them how their weekends and stuff was. So I definitely resonate. Okay, so that was your time at Grant Thornton. As I touched on in the introduction for yourself, you were there for about 5 years, I believe. What kind of made you realise it was time to move on?
I think the big thing for me was, that desire to want to be part of the performance of an organisation. Audit is very, very good for giving you a very broad base of education and experience to start from, but because it's the majority of it is backward facing, you're going and you're working on accounts that by the time you get in there, they're probably already about 3 months old, and you're talking about last year's performance. So for me, what I really wanted to do was to get into that space where you start to influence the way an organisation works, getting into its strategy, its tactics, just being part of the journey that they go on, and celebrating the successes that they have. So that was the key thing for me.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And so you went into, was it a finance business partner role with?
Yep, that's right.
With BA. How did that move come about? Oh, guys, very sorry. Just quickly, sorry to interrupt. Very quick. 2 things. Have you downloaded your free CV template yet? The one that was in the description below. It's still there. So, go ahead, download that. It's free. Second thing, I know I told you I'm the founder of 17 Partners, but I haven't told you what 17 Partners is. 17 Partners is a recruitment agency specializing in helping ACA qualified accountants transition and move out of practice into industry. So if you're looking to make a move out of practice, let's connect on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Darren Spain. Let's connect, send me a message, and let's see how I can help you. Let's get back into the episode.
That one was a recruitment agent hosted an open evening in effect. So they had like a dozen companies that were looking to recruit, and then they were obviously in touch with probably 2 or 3 times that number of people who were currently in practice and looking to move into industry. I recall going down there, and initially I wasn't sort of that interested in going and seeing BA. Personally, my dad was an aircraft engineer, and it was kind of a thought process of, do I really want to get in that space? Do I want to follow in his footsteps? I, in the end, I went in out of curiosity. Everyone was going to see BA, massive brand name. And I went in with a chap from KPMG, and he sort of popped in and handing out his CVs and had his kind of cream jumper all over his shoulders. First time passes, early promotion to assistant manager, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh crap. Of all things, this guy's here and he's going to be very, very good. And then they sat down and they introduced themselves, and one of them was from the engineering department. And, oh, brilliant. What type of engineering do you want to talk about? Line maintenance, heavy maintenance? And at the time, this other guy was sat opposite the engineering lady, and they sort of went, oh, actually, you two probably will get on. You better get up and swap around. And the look on his face as we changed chairs was hilarious. But as we came out, the agent came and spoke to me, and he was like, do you know what, the feedback I've had from the guys is really, really positive, and I think you should go for it. So that for me was kind of the start of that journey. So yeah, I guess the lesson learned there is that, even if at first it doesn't seem to appeal, it's always worth exploring things, because you just never know what might come off the back of it. And interestingly, working for BA opened up a whole new discussions between me and my dad. It was fascinating.
Yeah, no, brilliant. That's quite interesting the way it came about. So quite selfishly, after this, I'm actually going to pick your brains, because what you just described there about that type of fair type thing is something that I've actually been planning, if you like, in the background recently. So yeah, I'll be keen to just kind of maybe pinch some ideas, if you like, but we'll discuss that at another point. But no, so you went straight into an FBP role, finance business partner role. I know some of the listeners will be thinking, oh my gosh, okay, like how though? How? I know you obviously mentioned you went to this fair, you spoke to the people there, etc., right? But I guess just in terms of that transition from audit directly into a commercially minded finance business partner role, right? Because I get asked a lot of times, like, Darren, I'm interested in finance business partner role or financial planning and analysis roles, right? And unfortunately, sometimes I have to tell people, or all the time I have to tell people, look, it's not easy to go straight from audit into those types of roles, because of the nature of kind of what you've been doing audits, as you touched on, Paul, is obviously backwards looking, you're looking in the past, etc., and you're not really thinking with that commercial lens, if you like. So from your position, how did you find that transition? What would your advice be to people who are thinking, I would love to make a similar move, and kind of help paint a picture for the listeners with that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I had a little bit of an advantage growing up with aviation engineering sort of at my fingertips. I was doing my A-levels, and my dad was studying for the Boeing 737 exams. And it's weird the things that your brain absorbs when you're that age, and there was strange kind of latent knowledge I have about these aircraft. But I think the most important thing for me, and how I managed that transition, was just be curious and actively listen. Some of it comes from what I was saying before about relationships, but it was also the interest that I showed. Nothing gets people more motivated to want to talk to you and help you than you showing an interest in the thing that they're doing. And for me, when I've been working for companies and auditors have come in, some auditors are very, I've got a job to do, I'm doing that job, and off I go. And some of them are genuinely interested. You see them ask a question and you give an answer, and they can't help themselves. They've got that curiosity and that taste to want to know more. And that's good, because then I want to sit there and I want to talk to them and elaborate more, because it's good for me as well. There are so many auditors that kind of come into businesses and they go, oh, I clearly know how this all works. And you're like, well, you might be very good and you might know a lot of stuff, but you won't know everything. And be humble, because the world is now a different place now you're in industry, because you can have a direct impact on the performance of the business. And you have to remember that being in finance, you're a support function, and you need the people. Similar to audit, you need the people to be able to support you in order to perform at the best of your ability. The best performers I've ever seen are the ones who are good managers of people, because they find ways to be able to achieve more than you could achieve on your own. And I think that's key. So a healthy interest in what the people are doing, an open mind, and remember that it's a team game. You're not on your own in this.
No, brilliant. Thank you. Now, you've just touched on some there, actually, as well as you mentioned kind of relationship building being powerful, being able to manage people, etc. I mean, what other skills would you say you had to develop in order to succeed in that role in particular?
Resilience, I guess, is a big one. Sometimes you can be brought into a role and you don't necessarily know what condition that role is. BA was an interesting one, because you could be easily led into believing that because it's a very mature organisation, that their processes are going to be well established, and they are, but so much so that you can come into somewhere and you can go, oh my god, these processes are like decades old. I once was given some training for emergency, so BA being very heavily unionised, it can be vulnerable if staff go on strike, or if there's horrendous conditions that mean that back office staff have to be pulled into the front line to help out. And they gave me some training on how to rebook passengers that had been disrupted, or their flights had been disrupted. And I got there and there's this big CRT computer, tiny little monitor, massive unit, black screen, green text. And I looked at it and I went, I'm pretty sure this system is older than I am. Big clunky buttons and things. And and it was like, oh great, okay, well I've got to go and learn that. So not everything is going to be super modern in any organisation. It's an exciting time now, just generally, because you've got AI really kicking off. Lots of people starting to use it in lots of different ways, and change can be very, very good, but it can also be very, very stressful. And I think learning to be resilient and learning to not bite off more than you can chew are two key things. I would say, in order to be able to perform well.
Yeah. And you mentioned you did a maths degree as well. Did that play any part in being able to secure a commercially minded role?
Not at all.
No. I was just thinking in terms of maybe the stats, or if you did modelling or anything like that in there. But no, fair enough.
I mean, the interesting thing was that my experience of being at Grant Thornton when I went to do the ACA was they had a real passion for wanting to bring people in who had done languages, because they could deploy them on multiple different projects and overseas. And their view is they can teach you the maths bit. Part of the induction process is you do your tests to demonstrate that you've got the skill set. So they kind of go, well, look, they've got the capability, it'll be fine. I think what mathematics has taught me is a very analytical way of looking at things and analysing things. So it has helped me. Just go back on my flippant comment before where it hasn't helped me. I think more kind of what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to have a master's degree to be really good at stats or identifying patterns or things like that.
Yeah.
It helps me in terms of the way I think about things and how I approach certain situations and troubleshooting problems. And we'll get onto it. I assume shortly, but my next role at British Airways was project management and continuous improvement. And one of the things about continuous improvement is going in and looking at processes and saying, right, this is how this process works. Can you identify the flaws? Can you identify ways to make it more efficient? And that's where I think a mastery really helped me.
Okay, and you've just very nicely preempted the next kind of segment, if you like, or next question. But exactly, yes, as you said, you went into what your LinkedIn describes as a continuous improvement manager role with BA, which, if I'm not mistaken, was actually created specifically for you, Paul. So talk to me about that. I mean, curious again how you get into a position where a role is created for you, and kind of what were you doing in that role?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is building on the relationships bit. Working within the engineering department, I supported the supply chain business, and I got on very well with one of their managers there, who, working with the director of the department, was starting to look at a way to reshape the organisation. And what they'd identified is an opportunity to have a small team of specialist practitioners in project management and continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is a big thing within the aviation industry and most manufacturing industries. So there's a lot of subject matter to study and get your teeth into, and that showing an interest, talking to people, not just about work, but about the things that they do, their passions, and where they want to go. And this was a kind of thing that then led to being considered for the opportunity, because 6 months prior to it all going ahead, this guy approached me and he sort of said, "This is what we're planning to do. Would you be interested in applying?" So that was kind of how it started, and then over the next 6 months we kind of shaped it together in terms of knowing what was wanted from that role, what would be expected of me, and then starting to get into it. And off the back of that, I ended up doing 2 other qualifications, one in project management and something called the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. So it was really, really good because it was broadening my skill set massively, and B, it was then giving me an insight into the inner workings of a business, more so than you get as an accountant, because then we were starting to really look at how the business worked and what we could do to move things forward.
Lean Six Sigma Black Belt sounds like a martial arts kind of discipline. What is that?
I did think it would be good to sort of go around and go, yeah, I'm a black belt. I mean, it's very similar. I mean, Lean Six Sigma started off, it's got a number of sources, but I think one of my favourite stories is about Toyota, and I can't remember, I think it was 60s or 70s, and I'm probably badly paraphrasing the story, but one of the senior managers went to the factory one day, and he pulled a guy off the floor, and he drew a circle in chalk on the floor and put him in it and gave him a clipboard and a pen, and he said, "I want you to stand here all day and observe what goes on in the factory, and I want you to make notes on anything that looks unusual to you." And so this guy kind of sits there and 20 minutes go past and he doesn't really notice anything unusual. An hour goes past and then he's starting to notice a few repeated activities. So it's like, there's a guy over here on my right hand side and he's working on a car, but every time he needs a spanner or a torque wrench or something, he has to go over there to the toolbox to go and get it. And he's done that about 4 times now. So writes that down and on he goes. And by the end of the day, he's made several observations, and this evolved into becoming a methodology known as the 7 wastes. So there's 7 different types of waste, and movement and transportation are 2 of them. And off the back of that, you kind of go, well, why would you have this guy walking across the work floor to go and get tools that he needs? Why don't you bring the tools exactly to him? At British Airways, we had Porsche Consulting come in, which is a division of the main car manufacturer, and they had a good analogy because they were talking about engineers on aircraft, and the proportion of staff at the time in engineering was about 1/3 engineers and 2/3 engineers and 1/3 support staff. And they sort of said, well, when a doctor's working on a patient, they don't leave the patient and go and get their scalpel and, and their oxygen and all the rest of it that they need, the forceps. They have a nurse or an attending to go and do that. So that for me was very, very powerful, because it was like, yes, really a good structure for an organisation within aviation and manufacturing is that you want probably 1/3 of specialist people who you minimise the away time from the activity that they're trying to do, and then you have a solid support structure that is there to bring everything to them. And when you get into services, it's a little bit harder to see how that can work, but it's a fundamental principle in that really what you want to do is you want to bring everything to the person that they're doing, so that they're not wasting time running around looking for something or trying to work out how to do something, and you can apply it more generally. It doesn't have to be tools, it can be systems, it can be accesses, anything like that. If you want someone to do something, pave the way for them to do it.
No, brilliant. Now this role, obviously continuous improvement manager, is obviously a step away from the kind of accountancy space, if you like. So I'm just curious, did you find that the foundations of the ACA were there to be helpful, or did they kind of go out the window at this point?
No, they were really helpful, because even though you stepped away from finance, every organisation is very motivated by money, and and one of the good things that the ACA gave me was a good foundation in understanding how to present facts and figures, and how to analyse processes, and to look for evidence. So it's not just a finance qualification. It teaches you so much other stuff that can be applied in so many different arenas. So as a foundational basis for skills, it's really, really good.
Yeah, no, fair. And how long were you in that continuous improvement role for?
About 2.5 years.
Okay,
I think.
Okay, and it sounds like obviously you enjoyed your time with BA. You said it allowed you and your father to have different conversations to what you were having before, that kind of surprised you in the good way, if you like. You had a role crafted out for you. You were given a blank job description, and you said, "Yeah, I'd like to do this. I won't like to do that, etc., etc." So why does your time there come to an end then?
I think, like every good story, is it has to have an ending. I would have liked to have stayed on longer. I know people who are still there from when I was there, but really it was more about moving my career on, and it wasn't so much that I was actively looking, but when you're kind of, I think by that point I was 3 to 5 years post qualified, and that, in my experience, is kind of the sweet spot of what a lot of people are looking for, in terms of skills and experience. And every day you'd be getting recruitment agents calling you up or sending you sending you emails saying, I've got this opportunity, are you interested? LinkedIn was starting to really come into play about that period of time. And, there were several offers that came up, and I thought, well, actually these all sound very interesting, and they're on substantially more salary than I am at BA. So, there's a lot to be said for having a job you really enjoy, but there's also a lot to be said for, am I being correctly rewarded for the work and the skills that I have and that I'm doing? So that was then right, do I make the next move, and do I back myself to move my career on?
Yeah. So just on a point you just made there about obviously wondering whether you're being correctly compensated, if you like. So you mean to say they didn't give you a blank checkbook to go with the blank job description? I'm disappointed, man.
No, certainly not.
Because I imagine if they did, that certainly would not be a consideration for you, eh? But no, fair enough. So you then obviously made the move into Mapley Estates in the real estate sector. Now, just before we kind of get onto this part of your career, obviously touching on that point, real estate, you were just in aviation. We touched on at the start of the conversation that your audits were in financial services and kind of government agencies, if you like. So sectors that you hadn't, real estate and aviation, obviously sectors that you hadn't audited in. Again, I get asked by candidates around that piece who maybe the practice firm that they're in, they're within a business unit that's specifically focused on, let's say, financial services, as you did, for example, or specifically focus on, I remember when I was at BDO, it was solely professional services firms, if you like. Now, just curious from your perspective then, clearly it didn't, but do you feel there could have been any hindrance in terms of your opportunities that you got within BA and Mapley's as a result of you not having audited in them? And what would you say to people who are thinking, okay, I feel like I'm being pigeonholed into a specific industry because of the clients I'm auditing, if you like?
Yeah, I think the good thing about the ACA is that you can go and do anything. You demonstrate that to begin with. I said when we started the call that you get given accounts for any company, any industry, and when you have no experience, the world is an open book. And that's really, really good. I think what influences recruiting managers' decisions over experience is the strength of their position within the recruitment market. And also like the higher up you go in terms of seniority. As I mentioned a moment ago, 3 to 5 years post-qualified, everyone wants a bit of you. But a couple of years ago in the recruitment industry, there was I can't remember what they called it, the great, I want to call it the Great Migration, but lots of people were just suddenly post-COVID, right, I think I've had enough of this job, I'm off. And you're into your basic economics curve of supply and demand. There was a whole flood of applicants within the market, so recruiters could be selective about who they wanted. So, and I think there's an element of that that's still true today. It's easing a bit, but if you've got a lot of people that are moving, and recruiters have a lot of choice, recruiting companies have a lot of choice, they're going to pick the guy or the girl with the experience because they will be of the opinion that it's going to be easier for them to start up and get involved very, very quickly. But I mean, in my opinion, you've probably got, depending on how quick someone learns, you've probably got 18 months to 3 years, and then that person's caught up. So industry experience is helpful to get you up to speed, particularly if you're in that kind of just coming out of practice, but it's not essential in my view. It's very much governed by, I'd say, the market conditions.
Okay. And just before I ask this next question, conscious we've overshot the time I put in your calendar. Are you okay to continue?
Yeah, go on.
Brilliant, thank you. And so,
twice, Darren.
I know, I feel terrible, but technology, technology. You can't live with it, but you can't live without it either.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much. And so I guess on that then, I mean, what would you say are things that people could do? Let's say you're in that position where it might be a competitive market, somebody who, similar to yourself, maybe they've audited financial services companies, but they're looking for a role within retail, but they are up against people who maybe have more heavy retail or more of a retail focus in terms of their audits. I mean, is there any kind of advice or practical tips you could give them that could potentially help them?
It's all going to come down to performance in the interview, I think. You know, the challenge of the CV stage is it's increasingly becoming more of a box-ticking exercise, and particularly the larger organisations, the PLCs, they have so many applicants and they just screen CVs. AI as well, you know, if they're starting to use that, that's going to go and do keyword searches. So for the CV bit, it would be trying to do your best to kind of get the keywords in there. When it comes to the interview, that's where you have this opportunity, because someone can go in and they can have 7 or 8 years of experience on you, but fundamentally, if they don't engage with the interviewer, and if they don't give the interviewer that warm fuzzy feeling that they fit well, then you have that opportunity there to be able to go in and, you know, do all the things that we've been talking about. You know, build your relationship. You get one chance to make a good impression first time, so do that. I interviewed someone once, and my opening question was, well, why do you want this job? And he said, well, do you know what, to be honest, I just want some more money. And I was like,
just to clarify for the listeners, I definitely did not put that person forward. If I had, they would have been well and truly prepped on that one.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just kind of like, oh, come on, this is an absolute sitter of a question. It's not difficult. I mean, I appreciated his honesty, because it meant that I didn't go and recruit someone who wasn't going to be a good fit. But you know, it's make a good first impression, be engaging, be interested, actively listen to what the person is telling you. You know, have good questions. There's a lot of people who don't think about the questions that you ask the interviewer. And I know interviews are very stressful times, and you won't necessarily think of questions as you go through. But I mean, I've been to interviews and I've had my questions written down on a bit of paper, and I've said at the outset, you know, I've got this bit of paper with some questions, I didn't want to forget them, and put them down in front of me. And I mean, you could probably debate whether that's appropriate or not. My view is that it shows that someone's got a sense of organisation, and also a sense of you know, wanting to perform well in the interview. So that for me would be a tick in my box, and absolutely not a black spot, because they've done that.
100% agree.
Yeah, so it's niche, but there's your opportunity.
Yeah. And do you think there's something to be said as well? Because one thing I always advise people is to make sure, even if you are going forward for like a financial accountant, management accountant role, which maybe aren't as commercially focused as an FP&A or finance business partner role, to still go in with a commercial minding. And so if, for example, using the industries I mentioned earlier, so you've got financial service experience, you're looking at a retail role, going in with being up to date with what's going on in the retail landscape, and as you said, asking intelligent questions as a result that show that you're thinking about that space, and that you are tapped in, and that you are interested in. It's not just, as you said, you're just going for an interview because you got the interview and you want more money, right?
Absolutely. And you know, these days access to information is so much better than it was in the past. You know, AI, I've interviewed recently and I use ChatGPT. And I just asked it the question and said, what do you know about this company? And you have to be careful. You know, as a tool, it does have its limitations, but I use that as a jumping off point to then go and investigate further. So, you know, it can give you links to websites. You can go and check the credibility of the website. You know, you can go and get your facts direct from the source if you need to. So that I find really helpful. And, you know, how long does it take to type a message into an AI app? like 30 seconds. So, without wanting to be brutal, there's really no excuse for not being able to go in and be able to talk for 5 minutes about that company, what you know about it, what makes you interested in it, and also think about what you can do for them.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, I think I did briefly mention, but I really like that idea of going in with a piece of paper with your questions on it, because as you said, shows that you're making sure you get the questions that you really wanted to know the answers to out there. And yeah, it does show a level of organization as well, and it's just and resourcefulness, I'd say, as well, because it's like, why in 2025 are you expected to have to sit there for an hour answering questions that you've been asked, and then at the end of all of that, then also remember the questions that you had, So agreed. Right. So sorry, go on.
I think it's important as well to remember that an interview is a two-way street. You've got an hour generally to make a decision about, you're making the same decisions the interviewer is making. Is this person good for me? Are they good for the business? Can we work together? Can we work together under pressure? You've got to condense that all into an hour. So there's absolutely, I would say, there's nothing wrong with going in with a bit of paper, because it shows the importance. It shows you're treating it seriously, and making sure that you are making a well-informed decision as to your future with that company.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And I've never been into an interview where the person interviewing me has just come up with all the questions off the top of their head, right? They've always got a piece of paper there as well. And as you say, two-way street, treat it as such, right? And so, I 100% think there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't do that. So your move after BA was, as I touched on with Mapley Estates, you went there as an FP&A manager, so back into the kind of finance realm, if you like. And so, as with the move so far, talk to me about that transition.
That was quite different, because suddenly there was less emphasis on the soft skills, the working with people, and there was much more emphasis on models and systems. So again, a completely different set of skills that were being tested and developed. The soft skills were still needed, because you still need to interpret and analyse the data. You still need to work with the team to provide them with information that's useful for them. So it's no good going and preparing a report or a model that doesn't do what they need it to do. So that initial and follow-on engagement with the team is so important. But put your mind to it, you can achieve anything.
You're not wrong. And so you've actually been in real estate since, obviously, Mapley's, LabTech, Telereal Trillium, to name a few. Has that been intentional as to remaining in real estate, or is it just by chance?
I don't think it's necessarily been intentional to remain in real estate. I enjoy working in real estate. I'd say the subject matter has become more refined. Mapley was about the Santander and the HMRC portfolios. So, we were managing physical buildings. I then went to LabTech, who most well-known asset they had there was Camden Market. So instead of operating hundreds of buildings, you're operating one very significant asset. Omnidimensional shopping, I think they called it, was their terminology for what the market was doing. Then I moved to TT, and we did the whole spectrum of property, everything from land acquisition, big portfolios for the likes of BT, Royal Mail. We did stuff for Aviva and DVLA, and then to exit strategy, selling buildings, selling land, and I'm now working for a company called Obsidian Strategic, who are a land promoter. So although that's 4 different companies, all within the property sector, they all do very, very different things. So whilst you can sort of say you stayed in property and does it get boring or anything like that. It's no, I'm exploring lots of different facets of property. So yeah, there's plenty to do even within industry.
Yeah. And so I guess on that then, given the aviation experience and the real estate experience, I mean, just for people who are thinking about their moves out of practice and thinking about what industries to kind of pursue a career in, I mean, what would you say? What would be your kind of pitch in the sand for aviation and for real estate?
I loved aviation. The best bit about it was working engineering. Was if you wanted to go and feel it, tangibly see it, you could just walk down the building over the road, and the canteen was in the hangars, and you could sit there and watch planes being pulled apart, and had a look at. You could go on them. It was amazing. Something like that is so easy to get behind because you can see it, you can feel it. I think in that respect, one of the challenges with property is that you can see and you can feel buildings, but they don't do much. It's there. How long's it been there? Hundreds of years. You can change them. Development's really interesting because you can sort of go on that journey, but it moves at a lot slower pace. I couldn't advocate one over the other. I think what I would just say is that find something about the industry you're working in that you find fascinating, because that will become your motivator. I can find interest in lots of things, and that's the bit that keeps me going. I think is working out what really interests you. At the minute, one of the good things about working for a land promoter is the creative visualization piece. So working with the land managers, they'll go, right, we've got this promotion agreement, we can bring it up on Google, we can look at the site, and you go, it might just be a field and you see the roads, but then you can start getting into, okay, well, we're proposing to put 150 houses on here. What does that look like? Let's have a look at the plans that the architects have come up with, and you go on that visualization journey of trying to work out how you get from point A to point B. Ultimately we wouldn't do that. We'd sell the land on to a house builder who would do it. But it's a fun and exciting exercise. It just helps to make the work that you're doing come to life.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. Now, just wanted to ask a few questions that kind of, I know we've throughout the conversation provided some and for the listeners, but just wanted to kind of have a section focused on providing advice to people looking to leave practice. And so the first question on that would be kind of what advice, and again, you kind of touched on this and we spoke about this from a finance business partner perspective, but what advice would you have for people looking to move into an FP&A role? I know you mentioned around how you found obviously you needed a bit more modelling and stuff like that, and while the soft people skills etc were still relevant, maybe modelling was playing a bit more of a factor here. But what would you say to those looking to make a move into FP&A? I mean, it's generally it would just be like research the role, try and find out what you can. The good thing is, again, access to information is so much easier than it used to be. So AI is your friend. Get it to search LinkedIn, just check the role and just say, look, what skill sets do I need for this role, and then do that comparison. FP&A is going to be very analysis and modelling heavy, so you're going to be looking at what are your Excel skills like. Do you have any experience using any financial modelling tools like TM1 or Power BI or Tableau? Do you have any programming experience? Can you code in C++ or Python or Java or anything like that? None of these coding bits are essential, but they are a real useful tool to have when you go to the interview to emphasise. One thing to be mindful of, and I did find this with my maths degree, is don't be too clever. Because
I certainly found that if I tried to put something that was too clever in front of people, it would get rejected because they didn't understand it, or it was unnecessarily complicated. And that was a bit where I wasn't being clever, because I was thinking, here's this really convoluted way of doing it that will give you a really precise answer. But actually, it's the efficiency of getting to an answer. It's better to be generally right than specifically wrong. And I think that's a key thing to bear in mind. But and like finance business partnering, the keys there are going to be your soft skills. It's like how good are you at relationship building, resilience, organisation, managing pressure, solving problems, and don't be afraid to go that extra step and get yourself on some training. The ACA qualification for years was, for the lazy man, brilliant, because when you came up for your annual renewal, it was tick a box. Yes, I'm CPD qualified. I've done all of the experience I need this year. You pay your subs and on you go. As of last year, they've brought in, much like the ACCA has always maintained, an amount of CPD qualification that you need to be doing. But what's really good is that they've then brought this whole library of resource and courses that they make available to people. So this year alone, I've done, I think, 4 courses, and they're just hour-long webinars. One of them was with someone who works for Oracle, and they were talking about AI and the development of AI, which was fascinating. Another one was, just how private equity is operating within property and what the current environments that are going on. So, it's easier than ever to be able to go and take a dip in the ocean of all of these other things. And as I say, it's like at BA, I went and I did project management, and I did the Lean Six Sigma for the continuous improvement. All of these experiences that you'll have in your lifetime will all contribute towards your ability to be able to go and get that job that you want.
No, thank you. Again, I know we touched on the differences in terms of maybe skill sets required, but what would you say from a day-to-day, I guess, if you like, from what would you say the differences are, between finance business partnering and financial planning and analysis on a day-to-day basis of what you're doing on a day-to-day?
I think finance business partnering is probably more tactically focused. You're working with your heads of operations, and you're trying to find ways to support them, enable them to do their jobs better. So I found that there's a bit of month-end reporting. You obviously had to report on performance, but a lot of the rest of the time you're then looking at business cases, capex projects, process improvements, that sort of stuff. You're just trying to find ways to do things better. FP&A was potentially more strategic because you're at that higher level. I think perhaps it might have been a little bit easier for me because I had one portfolio that I managed. And I guess in bigger companies, that might become more challenging because you probably got your different operational functions, and there might be an FP&A person for each one of them, and then they consolidate up. But fundamentally, there's an area that you look after, and you're giving that financial helicopter view over everything. And the key is to look at how good you can make your forecast relative to their financial performance. And both have got their strong points, both have got their merits. And I think increasingly companies are looking for people to have both sets of skills. A good finance business partner will have good modelling skills. A good FP&A manager or specialists will have good engagement skills and relationship building skills. So they're both, I would say, on the same spectrum, just in very different places. So because of that, transitioning from one to the other is very doable. And ideally, you want to kind of be in that middle. You want to be able to do both.
Nice. Now, this next question might sound a bit funny coming from a recruiter, but as somebody who has obviously worked with recruiters from both perspectives, both perspectives as a candidate and obviously a client, I mean, how would you advise? Because I guess for those people who are kind of newly qualified, coming out of practice up until this point, they maybe haven't worked with a recruiter. How would you advise that they kind of go about starting and initiating that relationship with one?
I think, and I remember this from the last conversation we had, so I'm going to try and repeat it and get it right. It's it's about being proactive with recruiters. They're there to represent you. They're there to help you. So listen to them. But at the same time, don't wait for them to come to you. Go to them. Be active in your search. You can connect with recruiters on LinkedIn very easily. I've always found, Darren, you're very accessible, very easy talk to. If I needed to, I could just pick up the phone and just sort of say, if you don't pick up, I can leave you a message and say, Darren, we haven't spoken in a while. Shall we have a chat? Let's go for a coffee. Keep them in mind. Keep looking, because you don't know where the next opportunity is going to come. And if you think about, I mean, I don't know what the average recruiter's day is like, but probably when you wake up in the morning, you're thinking, right, I've got to call X, Y, Z, and there might be 4 or 5 phone calls that you need to make. And if one of those people kind of phones you up first, you're like, brilliant, that's made my day, because I can tick that off. And like anyone, recruiters can get snowballed by stuff coming and going. As we've seen, you have to be flexible and dynamic with your time. So if someone comes to you, that makes decisions, really. And a recruiter is going to be more motivated to want to talk to someone who is active about their search. If they're there going like, have you got anything? I'm really interested. Or what a recruiter hates is phoning someone up. I don't know, I'm guessing, but Darren, you can tell me. But if you phone someone up and then find out that actually the reason they've gone quiet on you is because they're in a process and you're in a process, and they've just kind of stonewalled you and gone with that job, and you're like, but hang on a minute, we were still going with this one. Sometimes it's just about manners and courtesy. Really.
I would 100% have to agree there. I mean, just to kind of piggyback off that point, it's an interesting one, that one, because I feel like maybe people, I don't know, maybe it's just a complete lack of kind of, I guess, courtesy, be like, or is maybe people feel bad or whatever. But as a recruiter, we just want to be kept in the loop, right? We're not expecting, if I put a role in front of you, just because I put a role in front of you doesn't mean you have to go for that role. Like, you've got free will, and I would rather, if it's not the role for you, that you didn't, right? Because I don't want you to go into a role that's ultimately not for you, right? And from our perspective, it's just so we're up to date, and so we can at least inform our hiring managers, for example. And so we're not sitting there with egg on our face, basically. It's like, oh, well, where's your candidate? I have no clue. And then they've updated their LinkedIn profile and they say, oh, I've started this new position. It's like, oh, thanks for letting me know. It's just so we just want to be kept in the loop, right? But no, I appreciate it. As I say, might have been a bit of a weird one coming from a recruiter, but I guess it's just always good to hear from, I guess, people that are in the position that I guess the audience will be. It's obviously always useful to hear from them and their perspective, right? So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, just to add to that, Darren, as well, is as a recruiting manager, I will talk to a recruiter, and if a recruiter says to me, oh, I know this person, I've known them for years, and they can give me a character profile, that recruiter is already doing half of your interview job for you. I would get excited about meeting someone who a recruiter can say, yep, I've known them. I've put them in other jobs before. They've always done really well at interview. They're really good. I know, that kind of championing of other people. And you will always have someone that you'll say like, how well do you know them? And it's like, oh, I don't really know them much. I've spoken to them, but they've given me a good impression initially. That's still championing it. And those recruiters are there to help you. So treat them the way you would want to be treated if you were helping someone.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess on that then, as obviously you touched on, you are a hiring manager yourself. So what are kind of things that you tend to look out for when hiring newly qualified accountants into your team?
Fit. Fit is a big thing for me. And it certainly was for my last company because, if you use a football analogy, you can have the best team in the world, or rather you can have a team full of the best players in the world, but if they don't play well together, then you're not going to do particularly well. So the key is to find people who resonate well with the people that you work with. I had an interview once with someone in my previous job, and on paper they were very good. They performed very well in the interview, but in the end, and it was a very, very tough message, I had to say to the recruiter, it's like, actually I think it's just that she was she was a very lovely person, but larger than life. She's a very active, extroverted kind of person, and I was like, this is not that kind of business. A lot of these people are quite introverted and quiet, and bringing someone like that in, even though I'm fairly confident they can do the job, there's going to be a clash. And that's something to bear in mind about. It's not a bad thing for someone to turn around to you and to say, well, look, we don't think you'd necessarily fit in this company, because they're doing you a favour. At the end of the day, you might really, really want that job, but you wouldn't want to get that job and then find out that you hated it because the people around you weren't the kind of people that you got on with. So fit is very important. And when I look at a CV, as I say, increasingly CVs are becoming more and more tick box exercises. Recruiting managers, they're only going to have a few minutes to look over it. So, make it look good. Get your keywords in there. Make sure it reads well and presents well. But where you're really going to make or break your opportunity is going to be in the interview. And the way, we mentioned it already, but to add more to it, the way to perform well in an interview is to really bring an energy into it, and to just to go in there and own it, really.
Yeah. And I guess somebody's interviewed, they've got their job, they've started now. I guess what are some early career habits or mindsets you think separate the good from the great?
I'm going to sound like a broken record now. Curiosity. The reader's only hearing this once. We've done this twice already now. But yeah, curiosity. Go talk to people, find out about what they're doing, what the company's doing. You never know what you might find out. There's a lot of people who will go in and only focus on like the C-suite, the senior managers and things like that. But talk to everyone. I get on fantastically well with PAs because they're the ones who find out everything that's going on. They know so much. They're so influential, and they can really help. So those are usually my go-to people. It really is all about just sort of building that network when you get in there. You never know when you might have to work with someone more closely, and you never know when someone might be able to help you moving forward. And it goes back to that kind of tailor-made role piece. the way you get those opportunities is you don't sit there and wait for them to come. You put yourself out there. You've kind of, it's quite challenging because you can't necessarily pick it for yourself. You can't go, oh, I'd love that role. All you can do is, it's kind of like fishing. You just have to sort of go and say, look, I'm interested in this. These things fascinate me. You be interested, be engaging, and you never know when someone might come along and go, oh, do you know what, this thing came up, this opportunity was discussed, and actually I really thought of you because we've talked about it. That's where you know that it's all paying off.
100%. Well, thank you for that. Right, Paul, we are home straight now. Just a quick fire round of 10 questions or so. Now I'm gonna lead with this. Some of them we may have touched on over the course of the conversation, but I guess if I ask a question that we have done so, it would be great if you just give one kind of just overarching what that final piece of advice would be in that regard, and that will become a lot more apparent as we get to question 8, it looks like. So first one, early bird or night owl? Are you an early bird or night owl?
I'm not very good at either. I struggle out of bed. I used to be pretty good at being a night owl, but then I had a son and he's 2.5 years old, so I'm 10:30 and I'm in bed now. I peak about this time, just before lunch.
So I've got you at the right time.
If you want me any time between kind of 10 and 12, that's where I excel.
And I've taken up that whole time frame, so I'm sorry to whoever's got to deal with you after. What's your favourite way to switch off after work?
Exercise.
Nice.
I like to cycle, I play rugby, go to the gym. It's a great way to just do something completely different. You spend all day at a laptop, go for a walk, get some air. It's a really good way to just digest the day.
100%. What's your favourite holiday destination?
I'll give you 2. One where I've been, which is the Mediterranean. I love clear blue seas. I love the fact that a lot of countries like Greece, they're not flat, so you can go from kind of the beach all the way up into the mountains very, very quickly. The second one is not a place I've been, but where I really, really want to go. I love pirates. I love that whole attitude. More the kind of, not the bad attitude of pirates that's historically been happening, but more the fun fantasy idea of pirates. But I'd love to go to the Caribbean.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Email or phone call?
Both. Phone someone, have a discussion, follow it up with an email. Because you just don't know how busy someone's going to be, and if they put the phone down and then someone else comes along and distracts them, the email is a trigger to remind them. But also, I'm a visual person, so if you come and talk to me, I'll remember the conversation much more readily than I will just an email.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Following up with an email is something I feel like a lot of people miss out on, so thank you. Paul, if you weren't in finance, what would you be doing?
Oh, I'd love to be a rock star.
Nice.
I've been playing guitar for about 20 years, so that would be where I would go.
It's funny, as you said that, it brought me back to accountancy though, because I'm thinking about the Zero adverts. I'm sure it's like accountants can't be rock stars.
Exactly. Yep.
So basically, you want to be an accountant still.
I'm quite comfortable getting numbers.
Looking back, what's one thing you wish you did more of earlier on in your career?
Focus on work-life balance. That's not to say that there isn't a time to work hard, but I think it's more recognizing the things that are important. It's not just all about moving on in your career and making money. There's a lot more to life than just that. So recognize when it's a time to work hard and a time to put in the hours, but also recognise when it's important to get that downtime and to push back.
No, solid advice. Which industry have you not worked in that you'd like to?
Oh. God, I can't even remember what we said last time. Based on the Rockstar one, I'm going to go music industry.
Nice, okay. And kind of that entertainment music piece, yeah. Nice.
Yep.
Question 8. one CV tip for candidates.
I always look for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And the reason is fairly obvious. It's attention to detail. Nothing gets my goat more than someone in an interview saying, "Yeah, I've got a really good, I'm really good at analysing things, and I've got a good eye for detail." And I go, "Yeah, but you spell about 8 different words wrong in your email, in your CV." So, it's just, it doesn't take long to check your CV and to ask someone else to check it and make sure you've got that. And I mean, email etiquette as well today is awful. So many people send emails, and very senior people I've had emails from, and I've had to go into their office and just sort of go, "This email that you've sent me, what does this mean?" Because this is so badly worded. And depending on how well you get on with that, I used to get on incredibly well with an old finance director of mine. So I used to be able to walk in there and go, "This is nonsense. Can you tell me what it is that you want to do? Because actually I could have saved you sending the email in a 30-second conversation right now."
Yeah. No, brilliant. Thank you. And then one interview tip for candidates.
Energy. I think, I mentioned it before. It's bring the energy. How do you bring the energy? I guess it's hard, but it's kind of, as I say, like my window of time is 10 till 12. So that's when that's when I operate at my best. I'm enthusiastic. I'm listening. I've got good. I hope I've had good eye contact. It's those kind of things. It's nothing makes an interview less memorable than someone who just sits there, answers the questions, and is very monotone. You want to be interested. You want to be enthusiastic. Own your answers that you're giving them. Don't waffle on. I'm awful at waffling on, as probably a lot of the listeners have noted by now. And there's an element of energy that's associated with that, because if you waffle on too long, it's energy draining. So short, concise answers.
Don't worry, Paul. I'm still full of energy. So it's been good. Thank you.
That's right. You can edit this so that it just. What would you recommend to the interviewer? There's energy done. There you go.
And final question: what would your closing words be for the listeners? Obviously, those who are looking to make their first move out of practice and into industry.
Back yourself. You can do it. Don't doubt yourself, because it's not as hard as you think. That would be my key point.
And final one from me: if you're interviewing and you see that Paul Bishop is the person interviewing you, make sure you book that interview between 10 and 12. But no, thank you so much, Paul, for the second time. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this conversation equally, if not better, than the first one, to be honest with you. So no, thank you very much for your time again. I greatly appreciate it. And obviously we'll keep in touch. But no, greatly appreciate your time and your insights.
Thanks, Darren. It's been a pleasure.
No worries at all.
For the second time, it's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Out of Practice podcast and took away some value from that. If you did, be sure to let me know by smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel. Let me know in the comments below if there are any questions you'd like me to ask any future guests, and I'll be sure to do so. Don't forget also, in the description below, you can find a link to download a free CV template. Make sure you go ahead and get yours. And if you're a recently or newly qualified ACA chartered accountant looking to make a move out of practice, then let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm the founder of 17 Partners, a recruitment agency specializing in helping ACA qualified accountants transition and make a move out of practice into industry. So connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a message, let's schedule a call, and let's see how I can support you make your next move.